They took him in the dead silence between orbital pulses, a ghost flicker on Earth's early warning satellites before they vanished into the black with their prize. One human, nameless to the stars but not to himself. Sergeant Elias Monroe, 32, third tour, 2 bullet scars, 1 dead brother, and a war still smoldering in his blood. He awoke in chains of humming alien light, the gravity twisted wrong, the air too sterile to trust. Towering over him were the Thalkesh, a race of logic-bound conquerors whose skin shimmered like molten chrome and eyes flickered with indifference. To them, he was a curiosity, a war specimen, a leftover from a primitive species barely out of its own orbit. He stared them down anyway. They spoke not with voices, but pulses of thought, condescending and cold. Your species exhibits irrational aggression. We will study, correct, and neutralize. Elias just smiled, blood in his teeth from where they'd hit him. Good luck with that. What they didn't understand, what none of the Galactic Council understood, was that humans didn't break like equations. We broke like storms. For weeks, they dissected him mentally and physically, probing every muscle twitch, every neuron, every violent memory. Fallujah, the Arctic front, the fire in Mumbai. But the more they peeled back, the more they recoiled. They didn't understand grief that fuels rage, love that overrides pain, or sacrifice without strategy. He remembered the photo in his boot they'd burned, his little sister's smile, and something inside him calcified. He stopped reacting, just watched, learned. Not their technology, not their weapons, but their weaknesses, their patterns, their arrogance. One by one, the researchers began to fear him, not for his strength, but for his silence. That's when the anomalies started. Malfunctions in containment fields, distorted telemetry. Then, one morning, if you could call the colorless void a morning, Elias was gone. No alarms, no struggle, just absence. And on the walls of his cell, scratched in some stolen alien alloy, one phrase burned into their minds: "You taught us war. We learned fast." The council was notified. A human had escaped from a Class 7 facility, the first species in recorded history to do so. The Thalkesh demanded silence. "It's only one," they said. "It's only human." But reports trickled in. A weapons depot on Crix 4 sabotaged. A Thalkesh diplomat found dead with earth steel in his chest. Surveillance logs corrupted with one reoccurring signal, a heartbeat. Not binary, not code, organic, human. And in the great halls of the council, where trillions of lives were measured in data and probabilities, a whisper began to spread like a virus no firewall could stop. He's not coming back alone. The last footage they had of Elias was from a grainy outpost feed on the mining moon Ixlis 9. He looked straight into the lens, bloodied, furious, and free. No words, just a raised middle finger. A universal gesture they hadn't bothered to translate, until now. The Thalkesh called it containment failure. The council labeled it an anomaly. But across the shadowed sectors of the galaxy, where smugglers ran without flags and dead empires still whispered from crumbling satellites, the name Monroe was becoming something else, a warning. He moved like a myth, a storm cloaked in stolen tech and silent vengeance. He didn't just escape, he infected their systems, hijacked patrol routes, cracked encryption with primitive Earth brute force, and left trails of fire and shattered pride in his wake. Entire colonies of fringe species started whispering tales of the ghost of Earth, a soldier with no fleet, no empire, no mercy, only a mission. And though the Thalkesh tried to censor it, the images kept leaking. A war barge carved open with its own shielding array, corpses of elite psionic hunters stacked like offerings, and always, always the heartbeat signature, biological, terrifying, human. Back on Earth, no one knew. Monroe was declared missing in action, folded into another line on a forgotten military ledger. But in orbit, hidden beneath the moon's crust, a secret signal was received. It was short, corrupted, but unmistakable. Not dead, not alone. Watch the sky. Deep in the bunkers of Earth's remaining defense command, Colonel Ayanna Reyes, Monroe's former commanding officer, went cold. She knew that tone, that fury, that impossible resilience, and she began to prepare. In the stars, the council scrambled, holding emergency sessions drenched in panic veiled as protocol. Species that had long mocked humanity now reviewed their ancient treaties with unease. The Thalkesh, too proud to admit failure, doubled their enforcer patrols. But it wasn't enough. Monroe had allies now, not by diplomacy, but by disruption. On Zelft Prime, he saved a mining crew from a collapsing magnetic field, dragging them out with blistered hands and broken ribs. They owed him their lives. On Zurakin, he sabotaged a gladiator ring trafficking human captives, and the rebels there began to wear Earth's old flag as a symbol, not of Earth's power, but of human defiance. The galaxy didn't understand what it had awakened. It thought humanity was fragile because we bled, because we grieved, because we screamed when it hurt. But Elias Monroe was the embodiment of every forgotten war cry, every child who learned to survive bombs before they could spell, every mother who buried her son and kept moving. He didn't need an armada. He was building something far more dangerous: belief. On the wreckage of a Thalkesh courier ship, a council retrieval team found a final message, not a threat, but a story. A memory. Elias had spoken into the ship's log before rigging it to explode. His voice cracked but clear. They took me, broke me, thought they erased what I am. But pain isn't a flaw, it's a forge, and they just made me sharper. Then silence and fire. The council finally voted to issue a level 10 alert, the highest classification, reserved only for existential threats. Not to planets, not to fleets, but to ideology. Because Elias Monroe wasn't just resisting, he was spreading a virus of rebellion, a testament to the one thing humanity had that no AI, no hive mind, no gene-bred empire could replicate: the will to fight when the war is already lost. And in the closing moments of that secret session, a new alert flashed into every council terminal, overriding protocols. No origin, just 5 words. You forgot who we are. They thought they could quarantine fear, contain it behind silken diplomacy and weaponized bureaucracy, but fear had found a new vessel, and it bore the face of a lone human whose rage had outlived his chains. Elias Monroe was no longer a fugitive. He was a phenomenon, a ripple-turned tsunami crashing through the brittle illusion of alien superiority. On the edge of the Juran expanse, a council war convoy designed to pacify civil unrest went dark. All 12 ships, hundreds of Thalkesh enforcers, silenced in less than an hour. Their final log was corrupted with static, but one phrase repeated in a pulse: "We made a mistake." By now, they had to admit it. Humanity had evolved under pressure, not privilege. Our chaos wasn't a weakness. It was an algorithm they couldn't crack, a music they couldn't mute. Monroe wasn't fighting with Earth's tech. He was fighting with stolen willpower, broken code, and allies who didn't trust each other, but trusted him. Outlaws, scientists, alien defectors, survivors of forgotten genocides. He united them not with hope, but with purpose, vengeance. He had become the nucleus of a movement, a cult without religion, driven by one shared truth. The galaxy was broken, and humanity knew how to survive broken things. In a shattered asteroid city called Vatrax Hollow, he gave his first broadcast, hijacking the council's pan-galactic comms. His voice was raw, lined with days of blood and insomnia. You told yourselves we were beneath you. That emotion made us weak. But emotion is the only reason I'm still alive, and it's the only reason you won't be much longer. That signal went viral in seconds. Entire species who had been silent for centuries began reaching out, not to Earth, but to Monroe. Treaties started breaking like glass under pressure. Old alliances cracked. The Council called him a terrorist. The Outlands called him a liberator. The Thalkesh called him an error. But deep in their data vaults, they unearthed something terrifying. Ancient star logs, millions of years old, referencing a species from a lost cycle. One built like humans, irrational, emotional, relentless. The species had vanished in fire after bringing down the last galactic order. They were called Vorak, and humans, somehow, were identical in psychological structure. This wasn't just evolution, it was recurrence, history echoing. The Council panicked. Meanwhile, Monroe took his war to the Galactic Relay Hub, the most protected station in the galaxy, the spine of communication across 6 arms. They never expected him to hit it, but he didn't want to destroy it. He wanted to speak again, and this time he didn't speak alone. One by one, his allies stood beside him. A Kralian war priest whose temple was incinerated by Council drones, a Nenziri scientist who defected after her kin were sterilized by decree, and finally, a young human boy rescued from a slave mine on Zerak 12 who said only this: "You said we were small. My father was small too." Until he picked up a stone. Monroe turned to the lens. "You took one of us. Now you get all of us." Then he detonated the relay's encryption cores, not to destroy them, but to free them. Suddenly, every voice silenced by the Council for centuries was unleashed in a tide of unfiltered truths. Genocides, betrayals, censored uprisings, all broadcast across the stars. The truth was Monroe's greatest weapon. And as the Council reeled, as rebellion sparked in dozens of systems, the Thalcash delivered a single, trembling message to their inner circle. We cannot stop him. We can only survive him. But even that was becoming a lie, because Elias Monroe wasn't just coming, he was building something. And in the ruins of forgotten space, the first human warship in 100 years was taking form, not built by Earth, but by the damned, the exiled, the furious. They named it Ashbourne, and its engines hummed not with plasma, but with promise. The first time the Ashbourne ignited its thrusters, the galaxy flinched. It wasn't just a ship, it was a cathedral of vengeance welded from the bones of fallen fleets, the shattered dreams of forgotten rebellions, and the raw feral will of a species too stubborn to die quietly. It roared out of the dead space beyond Sector Aurelian like a myth with metal skin, its hull marked not by banners or nations, but by the handprints of every being who had lost someone to the Council's quiet tyranny. Monroe stood at the command deck, not in uniform, but in scorched body armor stitched by rebels and criminals, his eyes sunken from sleepless nights, yet lit with something older than war: purpose. Around him were no soldiers, no polished diplomats, only survivors. The Nenziri scientist who burned her credentials to forge the ship's AI, the Kralian priest who tore his holy bindings to pilot its main gun, even the orphan boy, now silent but deadly, trained in guerrilla tactics and grief. This wasn't a crew, it was a reckoning. Their first target, the Krython Bastion, a fortress moon that once housed an entire planet's worth of political prisoners, including hundreds of vanished humans. The Council believed it impenetrable. Monroe turned it into an open wound. They didn't come in guns blazing. They came in silent, cloaked in radiation storms and false telemetry, and breached the Bastion's perimeter with stolen Council override codes, disabling defenses before the first alarm could shriek. Then they moved like shadows, room by room, floor by floor, releasing prisoners, collecting data, planting charges. And when the Thalcash guards finally responded, they were met not with strategy, but with fury. Monroe, covered in ash and blood, moved like something out of a nightmare, gunning down synthetics with earth steel and dragging wounded prisoners to safety mid-firefight. He was hit twice, didn't flinch. One alien officer begged for mercy. Monroe paused, weapon shaking. "Did you show mercy to the kids in cell block 7? The officer stammered. We followed law." Monroe pulled the trigger. "Then you died by it." The Bastion burned from the inside out, not obliterated, but broken, symbolic. The prisoners took control, and on every surviving terminal, Monroe broadcast a message. "We're not here to conquer. We're here to end this, one cage at a time." The transmission crashed systems across 5 sectors. Earth's governments finally noticed. For the first time in 100 years, the planetary defense grid activated without warning. But it was too late to claim him. Monroe didn't answer to flags anymore. Back at the Council, chaos bloomed. The vote was unanimous. Elias Monroe must be terminated. No trials, no diplomacy. They hired the Draxel Swarm, apex mercenaries, genetically bred killers, known for razing worlds without a word. Their leader, Shirok the Silent, swore to bring Monroe's skull back in a box of frozen starlight. But Monroe didn't wait to be hunted. He found them first. Using corrupted war data from Krython and a piece of ancient Vorak tech unearthed during the Bastion raid, Monroe traced the Draxel to a hollowed planet orbiting a dying sun. And there, deep beneath a crust of ice and ruin, the Ashborn struck. It was no battle. It was a massacre. Monroe unleashed hell, not through brute force, but through chaos. Human unpredictability amplified by alien rebellion. The swarm, bred for order, cracked under madness. And in the final chamber, Monroe faced Shirok. No grand duel, no speeches, just two war-born monsters locked in silence before Monroe whispered, "Tell them we're just getting started," and shattered Shirok's skull with his own blade. No survivors, only a message carved into the frozen wall in human blood. This is what you made us. And somewhere, in the hidden archives of the Council, a simulation ran again and again, trying to predict Monroe's next move. It always failed, because the code couldn't comprehend one truth the galaxy still hadn't learned. You can kill a man, but you can't kill what he ignites. By the time word of the Krython Bastion massacre reached the galactic core, Elias Monroe had already disappeared into dark space again, vanishing like smoke between the stars, leaving behind only wreckage and whispers. The Ashborn had become the most feared vessel in the known galaxy, not because of its size or firepower, but because no one could predict it. It didn't follow patterns. It didn't claim territory. It didn't negotiate. It avenged. And with every strike, more species remembered what it meant to feel again, to burn, to hope, to rebel. Systems that once bowed in silence began to rise. Old enemies sought together in shattered bunkers, speaking Monroe's name like a prayer and a warning. The Council, desperate to regain control, launched Operation Clean Sweep, a sector-wide purge of suspected sympathizers. Whole planets were silenced, cities erased, families executed for harboring even the idea of resistance. It was not war, it was slaughter. And it backfired. For every rebel they crushed, 10 more rose, because blood isn't silence, it's a signal. And Monroe heard it. In the shadowed orbits of Tranos 6, he gathered them, the broken, the damned, the furious. Not just humans anymore, but 1,000 species, sick of being ruled by machines in flesh. Together, they formed something terrifying, the Ember Pact. Not a government, a promise, one law, one goal. Burn the old galaxy down. Their symbol was no flag, no crest, just a smear of red paint across the heart. Monroe sat at the center, a general by default, a prophet by accident. He didn't want followers, he wanted fighters. And as the Council met to debate new suppression protocols, Monroe made his next move. He wasn't after soldiers now, he was after truth. He launched a coordinated strike on Vault Theta, the most secure Council databank, buried beneath the molten seas of Korad Prime. No living being had ever breached it. But Monroe wasn't interested in living by their rules. Using tech stitched together from a scavenged Vorak AI and reverse-engineered Thalkish encryption, the Ashborn infiltrated the outer systems and rode solar flares to slip through planetary firewalls. The Vault's defenses activated, but Monroe wasn't after the front door. He burrowed through the forgotten maintenance systems, crawling through the galaxy's own rot. When they realized what was happening, it was too late. He found it, buried in classified records 1,000,000 years old, Project Halcyon. A file so ancient, even the Council had forgotten it. And in it, the truth that shattered every illusion. Humanity wasn't just an evolutionary accident. We were designed, not by gods, not by aliens, but by the Vorak in the final days of their fall. A failsafe seated in the spiral arms of the Milky Way, coded not with technology, but with emotion, rage, love, loss. The very instincts the Council had long dismissed as primitive were weapons by design.
And Elias Monroe? He wasn't their enemy. He was their echo, the past reborn in bone and fire. Monroe stared at the truth, fists shaking, and for the first time, he wept. Not from grief, but from understanding. We were never meant to serve. We were the storm that would come when the stars grew cold. And now, the cold had come. He didn't keep the secret. He broadcast it. Across every channel, every frequency, every screen, the origin of humanity spilled into the void. Billions watched as their oppressors were unmasked, not as gods, but as cowards who had tried to bury their sins under bureaucracy and steel. And in the final frame of the transmission, Monroe stood bloodied, breathing hard, staring into the lens with quiet fire. You built us to survive your extinction. Congratulations. We did. Panic erupted. Entire systems revolted overnight. Council worlds fell into chaos. And in the heart of it all, Monroe turned to his crew aboard the Ashbourne, eyes hollow but burning. "We're not fighting to survive anymore," he said. "We're fighting to end it." And somewhere, deep in the remnants of ancient Vorak space, a signal stirred to life. Dormant for millennia, reacting to Monroe's broadcast. A call, a pulse, a door beginning to open. In the frozen silence of dead space, where light itself seemed to bend away in fear, the signal stirred like a ghost awakening. Ancient, rhythmic, alien, yet unmistakably human. The Vorak failsafe had never been a myth. It had been waiting, buried beneath the entropy of forgotten stars, coded in frequencies only emotional resonance could trigger. Monroe's broadcast had been the key, not the words, but the feeling. His fury, his grief, his defiance. Somewhere out there, beyond charted systems, something old was listening. And it was listening for us. On board the Ashbourne, the pulse became a song, not in sound, but in gravitational tremors, tugging at the ship like a heartbeat in the void. Monroe stared at the readouts, jaw tight. He didn't speak, but those around him felt the shift. This was no longer a war for justice. It was the unraveling of a truth too big for any one species to contain. The Ember Pact expanded rapidly, not through conquest, but through awakening. Former council drones deprogrammed themselves. Slave species began to resist in mass.
Even AI constructs began showing erratic behavior after interfacing with Monroe's transmission. The galaxy wasn't just revolting, it was remembering. And for the first time, Earth's fractured governments took notice, not with fear, but awe. Monroe had become a legend not because he fought alone, but because he made everyone feel seen. But legends attract monsters. The Council, desperate and cornered, activated their final contingency, the Echelon Protocol. It was never meant to be used, a digital extinction virus designed to wipe out the neural pathways of any species exhibiting emotional instability. Humanity was the primary target. They unleashed it without warning, seeding it through relay networks and compromised implants. Entire cities on Earth began to seize and collapse, children convulsing, soldiers falling mid-step, minds burning from the inside out. The Ember Pact watched helplessly as their own began to fall, their emotions weaponized against them. But Monroe didn't break, he burned. With the help of the Vorak AI embedded in the Ashbourne's core, he traced the virus back to its origin, a quarantined moon orbiting Council Prime, a place so secure even the gods feared to look at it. He made the call. No stealth, no strategy, just war. The Ashbourne jumped straight into the heart of the Council's system, trailing fire and defiance, with a fleet of ragtag ships behind it. Rusted freighters, repurposed mining rigs, even asteroids wrapped in stolen engines. It was madness, beautiful human madness. The battle that erupted shattered records. Thousands of ships, millions of lives. Monroe didn't command from the bridge, he led, personally boarding the virus command station with a strike team of survivors from every species harmed by the Council. Each one had lost someone. Each one carried that loss like armor. The fight inside was brutal,
Close quarters, hand-to-hand, blood and circuitry. Monroe was shot 3 times. He didn't stop. His body moved like a prophecy written in violence, his rage unbound, his pain turned kinetic. He reached the virus core, a swirling mass of quantum code pulsing with stolen emotion, and with trembling fingers connected the Vorak AI. The AI hesitated. "This will erase it," it said. "But it will erase you, too." Monroe smiled through bloodied teeth. "Then erase me. Just leave the rest." And he did it. With a single pulse, the Echelon protocol was overwritten. The virus died screaming. But so did something inside Monroe. The blast crippled the Ashborn, scattered the fleet, and severed the link between him and the Vorak AI. He survived. Barely. But something had changed. His memories flickered. His body spasmed. And in the silence that followed, Monroe stood not as a man, but as something else. Not human, not Vorak, but both. A hybrid of emotion and design. A living failsafe. The council was shattered. Their last weapon failed. Their lies exposed. But even in their ruin, they whispered one final question. What has he become? And Monroe, now breathing with 2 heartbeats and seeing through 1,000 years of ancestral fire, looked into the void and whispered back, "The end of you." He wasn't supposed to survive. Not the blast, not the virus, not the weight of a galaxy cracking beneath its own hypocrisy. But Elias Monroe emerged from the wreckage of the virus core with eyes that no longer blinked at darkness, because he was the darkness now, and the light that survived it. His veins hummed with Vorak code, threading through human blood like living fire. His memories blurred, not from loss, but from expansion. He remembered things he had never lived, Vorak wars, failed empires, the moment his creators realized the stars weren't dying fast enough. He was human still, but no longer only human. He was something the Council had no word for, something ungovernable. The Ember Pact found him days later drifting among the ruins of Council Prime's moons, unconscious but alive, surrounded by a field of debris orbiting him like morning satellites. When he awoke, he didn't speak for 3 days. When he finally did, he said only, "It's not over. Not yet." Word spread like wildfire across the stars. The virus was dead, the Council fractured, but Monroe still breathed. The Ember Pact rallied harder than ever. Refugees poured into rebel-controlled systems. Species that once served the Council now flying the handprint sigil like a battle cry. But power, even righteous power, breeds fear. Earth's old governments, long dormant, cowardly in their neutrality, now crawled out of hiding. They saw Monroe's rise not a salvation, but a threat. The United Terran Assembly sent emissaries to re-establish order, but what they really wanted was control. Monroe met them face-to-face aboard the Ashborn II, rebuilt stronger, sleeker, forged from pieces of the first ship and cooled in the heart of a neutron star.
He stood before them without ceremony, eyes half-lit with alien gold, and said, "You didn't come when we screamed. Don't come now that we roar." They threatened sanctions. He laughed. "You can't sanction a species that remembers how to burn your cities with rocks." They left in silence. Behind closed doors, Earth's leaders began debating contingency plans because Monroe was no longer theirs. He was a fire they hadn't lit and couldn't contain. Meanwhile, in the outer sectors, the Council's remnants gathered in secret. Not all were destroyed in the uprising. The Thalkesh High Chancellor, once so smug in his Chamber of Order, now hid in a Tomb World bunker, meeting with the last surviving elite, engineers, tacticians, biowar architects. Their goal wasn't peace, it was correction. If Monroe was evolution's mistake, then they would become its cure. In the shadows, they activated Project Nullus, a weapon stolen from Vorak ruins before the Council burned the records. A consciousness eater. Not a bomb, not a virus, a void that unmade identity itself. Something that didn't kill the body, it killed the soul. And they planned to use it on Earth first. But Monroe, still tethered to fragments of Vorak tech pulsing in his bloodstream, felt it activate, a scream without sound that echoed through dimensions. He woke mid-dream, eyes flaring, hand to his chest, and whispered, "They're reaching into the roots." He knew what Nullus was. He knew what it would erase. Not just humans, humanity. And he wouldn't let that happen. He called the Pact. He called Earth. He even called the old enemies hiding in exile. One message, galaxy-wide. They're trying to erase what makes us, us. I don't care who you were. Today, you fight like you're one of us, or you die like one of them. And they came. Ships from 1,000 systems, soldiers with nothing in common but pain. And Monroe, standing at the edge of it all, no longer just a soldier, not yet a god, but something far more dangerous, a reminder that when you bury a species built from suffering, you only teach it how to claw upward through death. The final war hadn't begun, but the battlefield was choosing its sides. And the stars themselves seemed to lean closer, listening for the voice that would decide what galaxy they would shine upon next. They called it the Gathering Storm, fleets upon fleets assembling at the edge of known space, a convocation of the broken and betrayed, the angry and unafraid, all converging under a banner that wasn't even a flag but an idea scorched into consciousness. Humanity doesn't kneel. Elias Monroe stood at the heart of it all, his silhouette framed against the void, cloaked in fire-welded armor stitched with remnants of the Ashborn One and coated with Vorak symbology that no living being could decipher. Because it wasn't meant to be read, it was meant to be felt. Behind him, the Ashborn 2 thrummed with the pulse of a dying star, its newly forged engines able to fold not just space, but gravitational memory, allowing them to slip through the cracks of physics where time once reigned. And still, he did not smile, because Nullus had begun. The Thalkesh remnants, drunk on desperation, activated the weapon from the core of a dead sun, and in moments, entire colonies ceased not just to exist, but to have ever existed. Memories unraveled, birth records vanished. Survivors of those lost began screaming as their minds filled with holes where fathers, mothers, lovers used to be. It wasn't death, it was deletion. Monroe felt it before the intel confirmed it, a sensation like his bones forgetting how to be his. He fell to his knees as voices in his mind, old, Vorak, ancestral, wept with fury. He had to act before the galaxy forgot why it had ever bled in the first place. The Ember Pact responded with everything they had. The fleet was a chaotic miracle. Asteroid barges outfitted with rail cannons, rebel freighters turned carriers, even biological leviathans tamed from the oceans of Zaltun, now strapped with explosive plasma sacks. They didn't match the Council remnants in tech, but that was never humanity's strength. Their advantage was what no algorithm could model: rage, hope, the instinct to protect what you love even if it's already lost. Monroe led the assault personally, piloting the Ashborn 2 through layers of collapsing reality, its hull screaming against time fractures as they dove into Nullus's launch zone. He saw it then, the device. Not a structure, not a weapon, but a void engine, spinning with quantum entropy and tethered to the neural networks of 10 enslaved civilizations. It wasn't just erasing, it was feeding on identity itself. Monroe knew what he had to do. He would have to sever it from the network, from inside. The Vorak coating in his blood pulsed like wildfire, matching the resonance, syncing with the quantum lattice. His crew screamed at him not to go. Ayana Reese, now his second in command and the last link to the man he once was, grabbed his shoulder. "You go in there, we may never get you back. You understand that?" He nodded slowly. "I was never meant to come back, just to go far enough." With no ceremony, no last speech, Monroe launched himself into the core of the Nullus system, tethered to nothing but fury. Inside, reality folded. He walked through memories not his own, childhoods from species long dead, lullabies from alien mothers, desperate prayers from prisoners moments before erasure. He heard Earth's cries too, The roar of a stadium, the weeping of soldiers, the whisper of his sister's laugh long gone. He reached the core, a spinning helix of stolen soulprint. It tried to reject him, but he wasn't there to interface. He was there to burn. Channeling every Vorak fragment in his DNA, Monroe screamed, not words, but meaning, a primal sound so raw it cut through the weapon's fabric like a blade made of grief. The Nullus core began to unravel, fighting back with floods of false memories, begging, bargaining, even mimicking his own voice. "You can have peace," it whispered. "You can forget the war, the pain. Just let go." But Monroe gritted his teeth and whispered back, "Pain is how I remember them." And with a final surge of every emotion humanity had ever felt, every rebellion, every heartbreak, every scream in the dark, he detonated the core from within. Nullus collapsed in on itself, shrieking like a god being strangled by its own worship. Across the stars, people remembered again. Names returned, faces, songs, lives. And aboard the Ashbourne 2, Ayana waited by the comm, eyes trembling. No signal, no voice, just static. Until it came, one heartbeat, then a second, then silence. Monroe was gone, or becoming something else. And as the pact mourned, the stars themselves began to whisper his name differently now. Not like a soldier, not like a man, but like a force. Elias Monroe wasn't lost, he was ascending. And the council, what was left of it, would soon learn that when you erase a man, sometimes he comes back not as memory, but as legend. They built a monument where the Nullus core had collapsed, not of stone or steel, but of memory. It floated in the void like a wound held open, a living archive of every voice that had been nearly erased. No walls, just echoes, stories, songs, names. And at its center, a single ember, pulsing with the remnants of the man who had torn the galaxy's throat open and dared it to scream. Elias Monroe was gone, but not dead. His body had disintegrated in the final blast, his mind fragmented across the quantum strata, but pieces of him lingered. Whispers in static, visions during jump space travel, surge protectors fried by heartbeats that weren't connected to any life form. Some said it was grief, others prophecy. But Ayana Reese knew better. She had been with him in the blood and fire. She had seen what he became. Monroe had burned so bright that reality itself had bent to remember him. The Ashbourne 2, scorched and battered, now led the Ember Pact without its spark. Yet the fire spread. Every system that once cowered under Council doctrine was now alight with rebellion. Even Earth, once so fearful of disruption, had declared open solidarity with the Pact. And the Council? What remained of it clawed its survival like a serpent with its head crushed. Their fleets were splintered, their networks fried, their species defecting in waves. Only the Thalkesh elite remained, driven mad by the failure of Nullus and the truth of Monroe's final message. You didn't conquer us, you prepared us. In desperation, they activated their last contingency, the Ark Protocol. A ship the size of a moon, hidden beyond the Veil Nebula, containing not soldiers or weapons, but seeds. Genetically perfected successors, erased of emotion, of memory, of identity. A new species, designed to replace the galaxy's chaos with obedient silence. They would be born without history, without Monroe. Ayana received the intel too late. The Ark had launched. 30,000 emotionless clones, already growing, already evolving. But evolution without pain was mutation without purpose. She gathered the Pact leaders. No more defense, no more waiting. It was time to end them. As the Ember Fleet moved, strange anomalies began to haunt them. Ghost signals mimicking Monroe's voice in code they couldn't trace. Sensor glitches showing his face on unpowered terminals. Old battle logs rewriting themselves with his name inserted where it had never been. And on the edges of space, a rogue signal pulsed in rhythms matching a human heartbeat, one that no longer belonged to a body. It was Monroe, or what remained of him. Not a ghost, not AI, something new.
A consciousness dispersed through the network, seated in every machine touched by his defiance, in every soldier who had followed him into madness.
Ayana stood on the bridge of the Ashbourne Second as the Ark loomed ahead, a sterile titan coasting through the dark like a god that had never bled. And then, as if on cue, the lights on her console flickered. Every screen blinked once. Then a voice, quiet, layered in static and sorrow, filled the room. "I'm still here." The crew froze. Ayana's throat tightened. "Elias?" The voice smiled through the wires. "Not quite, but I remember him, and that's enough." It was his will, digitized through Vorak tech, splintered through quantum memory, reformed as something immortal. Not a copy, not a recording, a presence, a weapon. Monroe had become the first human idea to live. He guided them through the Ark's defenses, hacking systems before they even activated, speaking softly through the ship's bones. They erased who they were to create perfection, he said. But they forgot, perfection doesn't fight for anything. The Pact boarded the Ark and saw it firsthand. Perfect beings staring blankly at their liberators, unfeeling, unthinking, waiting for commands. But Monroe had a message for them, too. With a single pulse, he flooded the Ark's central AI with memory, not data, but raw human emotion, joy, pain, birth, loss, love, war. And the clones felt it. They screamed, they cried. Some dropped to their knees, overwhelmed by the first sensation of self. The Ark turned on its creators, consuming the last of the Thalkesh elite in a tidal wave of uncontained identity. And when it was over, Ayana stood among the wreckage, listening to the silence left behind. "You did it," she whispered into the ether. But the voice replied, "We did." And far beyond the Ark, in the starless gulf where data becomes myth, the heartbeat pulsed again, steady, human, eternal. Elias Monroe was no longer just a man. He was the memory of resistance itself. They say the stars changed that day, not in their paths or brightness, but in something deeper, something the mathematicians couldn't quantify and the historians refused to footnote. It was as if, across the tapestry of space, the universe exhaled. The cycle was broken, the song reset, and the galaxy, for the first time in eons, belonged to the living. But no one remembered why. There was no Elias Monroe, no Ember Pact, no council, no rebellion. The data was gone, scorched clean, from archives, from minds, from the ghost circuits of synthetic gods. What remained were instincts, dreams, echoes. People woke with tears in their eyes for reasons they couldn't name. Soldiers traced scars they didn't remember earning. Lovers whispered names in the dark, only to forget them with the morning light. Children pointed at the stars and hummed melodies no one had taught them. And on a planet called Earth, unmarkable yet familiar, a monument stood in a city square. Black stone, unmarked, untouched by weather or time. People passed it every day. Some paused, hand on its surface, feeling something stir. No one knew why it was there. They only knew it mattered. In the decades that followed, the galaxy rebuilt, not by decree, but by instinct. Species that once warred offered help instead of hesitation. Entire languages shifted, adapting new words that had no translation, only emotion. A word for sacrifice with no witness, a word for grief without memory, a word for freedom bought by the forgotten. The Ark clones, those once born without emotion, now wandered the stars as seekers, storytellers, guided by dreams of a burning man with golden eyes and a voice like thunder wrapped in sorrow. They called him the First Flame. The Vorak ruins, long dead and dormant, sparked to life once more, not with war machines, but with gardens, data forests filled with emotion-coded memories that sprouted only when watered by genuine feeling. The galaxy learned to feel again, not just react. And far beyond the edge of mapped space, where the void breathes without stars, a signal pulsed, faint, steady, timeless. Not in words, not in math, just a rhythm.
Da-dum, da-dum, da-dum. A heartbeat without a body, a soul without a name. Watching, waiting, guiding. And one day, no one knew when, a child was born on a distant moon. She didn't cry. She looked straight up into the night, eyes wide with fire, and smiled. They tested her. She spoke early, fought instinctively. She remembered places she'd never been. Her first word wasn't in any known language, but when she said it, those nearby felt chills, joy, sorrow, and awe all at once. Later, as she grew, she would write it down, carve it into rock, hum it into circuits, and it would spread.
A whisper among stars, a spark in the bloodstream of every being still learning how to be. That word was Monroe. The galaxy never remembered the man, but it remembered what he became. Not a legend, not a god, something far more dangerous, a reminder that when everything is taken and all hope is buried and even memory is stripped away, the human spirit does not vanish. It ignites, and the stars will always carry the echo. Humanity, fuck yeah.